Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kirsch.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
Well, this was different. This was completely different. We're doing this in the morning, which means I have coffee and water, and I don't have wine and gin.
Unless you would be seriously in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So I did not have wine or gin for this recording, but I think it was still a really, really good recording. Who's on the show today?
Yeah, today we had Nir Eyal on the show with his book Indistractable, which is his second book after Hooked that probably a lot of people are familiar with. And we talked a lot about distraction and how to do something about it.
Yeah, I think it was a really good book, a really useful book. We were talking to him at the end of the recording after we'd already cut off, and I said, "Are you writing a third book?" He says, "I haven't figured out what's broken in my life yet that I need to write my third book for. And if I have a problem and somebody else has already written a book, I don't need to write another one." And that really shows because he's put 5 years worth of research into this particular topic and really pulls out actual workable, usable strategies. I think my key takeaways out of this were understanding the difference between distraction and diversion, and really understanding not just grammatically and where does the origin of the words come from, but distraction is a negative context, and diverting my attention back to where it should be from where it went. There was a really nice kind of clarification between those two. And the other one is technology. It's not always bad. Technology by itself is neither good nor bad. It's how we use technology instead of letting technology use us. We can indeed use technology to minimize our distractions and actually be more effective and more productive. And I thought that was a great thing. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, there was some really great stories in this, and it's great. I start to love behavioral science more and more the more I talk to people who do this kind of stuff and approach problems like this. And he's got some great stories from nurses in high-vis vests to, Slack as a company being internally quite different than you might imagine than it looks from the outside when you judge them by the app they're producing. So some really great stories in there. But towards the actual end, so you have to listen to it till the end, there's a great story on schooling and the impact schools have on attention. And based on a research he found about Guatemalan children who actually, because they have been less schooled, less had it imposed on them to pay attention. Like our kids in school, they're told by the bell and by the teacher when to pay attention, when not. And because these kids had more agency to do it themselves, had to figure it out themselves, they actually had this muscle way more well trained in order how and when to pay attention and when to do it themselves, and therefore deal with it much better. And they couldn't quite explain it, but based it on, well, they haven't been in the system. And it's actually, if someone pushes you less to do certain things, if you feel you have your own decision space to do so, and I think that often probably goes with psychological safety to do so, you will perform better. You will be more focused, more productive. And I think there's a lot to learn for a lot of organizations on that. That was sort of my big takeaway in that one. But as there's a lot of stories and a lot of really good stuff in there, and he's a very, very smart speaker, why don't we go to the interview? Before the interview, a quick word from our very first sponsor, Zencastr. We use Zencastr for all our audio and video recording, and it's a very nifty tool that splits up all the channels for very easy editing. Zencastr is used by 10% of all active podcasts. You can get 40% off the first 3 months and unlimited audio and video recordings with our special coupon code wickedpodcast. I repeat, wickedpodcast for 40% off. And now the interview. Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Bob Henderson. So I'm joking. We're here with Nir Eyal, a little inside joke there from our side. Hello, Nir. Thanks for having you today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
So as usual, we start from the top. So please tell our listeners who you are and why you wrote the book.
Sure. So my name is Nir Eyal, and I am a behavioral designer. I help companies build products and services that help their users create healthy habits in their life. So I primarily work with healthcare, education companies, financial services companies, any company that's trying to bring people back, to get them hooked onto their product or service, to build healthy habits in their lives, helping people exercise more, learn something, stick to a healthcare regimen, anything like that. Those are the kind of products I work with. I taught for many years the Stanford Graduate School of Business and the Hasselplattner Institute of Design. Later, I published my first book, Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And then most recently, I published my second book, which was the other side of the coin. If Hooked was about how to build good habits, I wanted to write a book about the other side. A problem that I had that was near and dear to my heart was this problem of distraction. How do we break bad habits? And so I wrote the book Indistractable. And the subtitle for that was How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. And so that's me.
So it's great that you mentioned the previous book Hooked as well, because it felt when we started reading it that the second one was a bit of, as you said, the other side of the coin, or a bit of the antidote to that of sorts. It's one side to get it hooked and get people maybe distracted or glued up to it, and the other one, this one is now about the other side, like getting rid of it. Are you sort of somewhere? Is there contradiction there somewhere, or is it sort of two parts that make sense and have their particular existence there around that?
Well, they're complementary. I think we can have both, right? We can learn good habits and we can break bad habits at the same time. And so Hooked is for companies that are trying to get people hooked to good behaviors, right? I stole the secrets of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp and Slack. They didn't know they didn't need to know these secrets. They already knew them. I wanted to democratize these techniques so that the rest of us, right, people who are building SaaS products and healthcare products and all kinds of business products, can use these techniques to improve their users' lives, and of course improve their bottom line. But my clients were never, the social media companies. They knew that's where I stole these techniques from. That's where I learned them and researched them. So yeah, we can use these techniques for good, and we can also know, because I know these companies' tricks, I know how they get you hooked. I wrote the book Hooked. I also felt that I have a background that can help people with the antidote, and it was an antidote that I needed. I found that I was distracted by various things, not just my technology, all sorts of things. Distraction has been with us since time immemorial. Plato talked about it 2,500 years ago. He called it akrasia, the tendency to do things against our better interests. So distraction is not something that technology somehow created. It's always been with us. And what I wanted to do was to dive deeper than just the technology distractions, what we call the proximal cause, our phones, the devices, all the modern things that we have. That's not the root cause of the problem. The root cause goes much deeper. And so I wanted to understand the deeper psychology behind why we get distracted.
So if you think about the deeper psychology of things, you talk about the amygdala brain and the fact that we are indeed drawn, our attention is indeed drawn to those things that, might threaten our very existence or threaten our lives. And the fact that so much of the attention economy is based on fear and driving fear and making things more risky or more threatening. How does that factor into the whole distraction? I mean, yes, I get a ping on my phone that gets my attention, but then they give me an injection of, oh my gosh, you might die. So what's your view on that side of the attention economy?
Hey, look, the world is bifurcating into two kinds of people. The people who allow their time and attention and their lives to be manipulated and controlled by others, and people who say, no, I will decide for myself how I control my time and attention in my life. And those are people that we call indistractable. So becoming indistractable will be the skill of the century. There is no aspect of your life that is not affected by your ability to control your attention. This is the superpower. This is the macro power that we need. If you're not reading the books you want to read, if you're not exercising, if you're not eating right, if you're not being productive at work, if you're not spending quality time with your family, and you ask yourself at the end of every day, why? Why did I get distracted? This is the antidote. This is what you have to understand, that if you wait around for the politicians to fix this problem, you're crazy. If you hold your breath waiting for the companies to fix this problem, you will suffocate. Do something about it. We see this happening every day to us, day after day, and I got sick of it. And so as opposed to waving my fist and saying, come on, companies, stop making your products so good. How ridiculous is that, right? Hey, Netflix, can you make your shows less interesting? Hey, Apple, your devices, they're way too user-friendly. Please stop it. It's not going to happen, people. We have to do something about this ourselves. And we have to teach our children how to become indistractable as well. Because if you think the world is distracting now, just wait a few years. It's only going to become more distracting. And so there's really going to be a bifurcation between people who can control their attention and choose their life and everybody else.
Yeah, and there is one of the root causes, or the way you describe it, is like you say that all motivation is a desire to escape discomfort, and to escape pain, we tend to procrastinate, and procrastination is being less productive as work. I think work in particular has become a very interesting area of a lot of phenomena over, especially the last year and a half, COVID times, and there seems to be a movement where people are more and more aware of what they actually don't like at work, now that they have the sort of comparison to how it looks at home and what companies do about it. If we say that certain contexts are painful and in theory should move away from that, or just push that away to be less distracted, how can we help people a bit more, maybe identify these items at work, maybe in particular, to say, right, I'm very distracted at work because it's sort of painful, so the distraction is not going to solve that. It's actually about figuring out what's the pain part and then maybe doing something about that.
So let's back up a little bit, because I think you're exploding people's minds right now without explaining what you're talking about. So let's because you read the book, which is great.
Yeah,
but
sorry,
let's get everybody else up to speed. So the assertion that I make is that if we want to understand distraction, and to me it's a very interesting question, why is it that despite knowing what to do, we don't do it? Right? The problem that we have today used to be maybe in our grandparents' generation, when they didn't know how to do something, they went to a source of knowledge to find out the answer to their problem, right? They asked the priest. If they were lucky, they might be able to go to the library. They looked for information somewhere because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know the answer. That is not our problem. Our problem today is not that we have scarcity of information. If you don't know the answers to something, you Google it. We have infinite amounts of information. There's more blogs to read, more books to consume, more videos to watch than you could ever watch in many, many lifetimes, right? So we have no shortage of information. So there is no excuse to say, you know what, I wanted to get healthy, but I didn't know how to lose weight. It's there. Who doesn't know how to be more productive at work? Do the work, especially the hard stuff that other people don't want to do. How do you have good relationships? You have to be fully present with people. We know this stuff. Who doesn't know? We all know. The problem is we don't know how to get out of our own way. We don't know how to stop getting distracted. And so to do that, to ask ourselves why, despite knowing what to do, and this is an ancient question. Plato had the same exact question. Of why, despite knowing what to do, people don't do the right thing, the thing that they later regret not doing. And the answer is we have to start with motivation. What is the nature of human motivation? Now, most people totally misunderstand the nature of human motivation. Most people think that if you ask them, hey, how do you motivate someone? They will give you some version of carrots and sticks, right? That everything we do is about pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain, right? Sigmund Freud said this. Jeremy Bentham said this. Not true. Turns out that we now know, neurologically speaking, that human motivation is not about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, but rather everything you do for only one reason, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. Everything you do, even the pursuit of pleasurable sensations, wanting to feel good, is itself psychologically destabilizing. Craving, desire, lusting, wanting. It hurts. There's a reason we say love hurts, because desire is uncomfortable. That's what spurs us to go get the things that make us feel good. But fundamentally, the way the brain motivates us to act is through what we call the homeostatic response. So think about it physiologically, right? So if you go outside and it's cold, the brain says, ooh, that doesn't feel good. You should put on a coat. And when you go back inside, the brain says, oh, you're too hot. You have to regulate your temperature. Take it off. If you're hungry, your brain gets signals that you feel hunger pangs. And if you eat too much, now you feel stuffed. The brain says you've had enough, stop eating. So physiologically, this is common sense. The same holds true psychologically. So when you're feeling lonely, you check Facebook. When you're uncertain, we Google. When you're bored, lots of solutions to boredom, right? Sports scores, stock prices. Oh, let's check the news so we can worry about somebody's problem 3,000 miles away, as opposed to having to think about and sit with our feelings in our own head. So what we have to understand is that all human behavior stems from a desire to escape discomfort, which therefore means if all human behavior is a desire to escape discomfort, that time management is pain management. I'll say that again. Time management is pain management. I spent 5 years researching all the tricks, all the psychological literature, all the research around this topic. And I would tell you that none of the stuff works. None of it works unless you start first and foremost, as the first step, understanding what are your internal triggers. What are these uncomfortable emotional states that you're seeking to escape from? Because whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much food, too much football, too much Facebook, it doesn't matter. You're always going to get distracted from something unless you know the underlying reason that you are trying to escape discomfort in the first place. So the first step to becoming indistractable, the most important step, is mastering these internal triggers, or they will become your master.
Interesting. And I like that time management is pain management, because it really is. We're doing everything to avoid that sensation of pain.
Right. That's right. If you talk to people and you say, okay, why didn't you do what you said you were going to do? Right. Oh, I was going to work on that blog post, or I'm going to finish that RFP, or I'm going to make those sales calls. Why didn't you do it? Or I was going to exercise. Why didn't you do it? Number one reason, I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like it. So what we're talking about here, we blame technology all day long, but it's feelings, people. It's a feeling. And the good news is it's not a moral failing. You know, people say, oh, I have a short attention span. I'm no good with time management. They make up these cockamamie excuses, and they shame and blame themselves into thinking that there's something wrong with them, that they're somehow broken. Most people have nothing wrong with them. It's simply that they haven't learned how to deal with discomfort in a healthy way that leads them towards traction rather than distraction.
So we work with a lot of organizations, large and small, sometimes startups, sometimes great big companies. And we've been talking a lot about distraction at a human individual level. Do you think distraction happens at an organizational level? And how do we build an indistractable team, or an indistractable purpose, or an indistractable organization is one of the questions that we'd like to ask.
Absolutely. It's a terrific question. So half of the book is about what you can do as an individual. The other half of the book relates to the fact that, look, you know, we can't be so naive to say it's all up to the individual. It's not. There are external factors that go into someone's life. So one of the big sections in the book is about the workplace. And what I learned in my 5 years of research around this topic is that distraction in the workplace is a symptom of cultural dysfunction. Distraction is a symptom of dysfunction. That if you work in a place where you can't raise your hand and say, hey, I can't do my best work if I'm constantly interrupted. If you're afraid to say that, you lack what's called psychological safety. And there's a lot of research around this topic. If you can't talk about the problem, that is the problem. It's not the technology. It's the fact that you can't talk about this because you're afraid of getting fired. You're afraid of retribution if you bring it up. People are going to think I'm not a team player. People are going to think I'm lazy. That's the problem. That's the problem, that we can't talk about it. And so what I do in the book is I profile companies that are indistractable. And it's amazing. There are 3 tenets of companies that do become indistractable. And what really shocked me is that I was looking for companies that exemplify this. And one of the companies that came up was, funny enough, a company that people blame for distracting them. So we did this survey around the most distracting technologies in the workplace. Number one most distracting technology, see if you can guess. I'm sure you can. Email. Email was the number one most distracting technology. Number 2 was group messaging. Okay. And the number one group messaging service is Slack. And so I wanted to pay Slack a visit. I want to go over there and see, this company that makes this technology that everybody complains distracts them all day long. And I wanted to pay them a visit. And what I found shocked me. That Slack, the company that should be very distracted, right? If the technology is the problem, then they should be more distracted than anybody because they use it more than anybody. But that's not what I found. That in fact, Slack doesn't struggle with distraction. If you use Slack on nights and weekends, if you work at Slack, you are reprimanded. You are told that is not what we do here because it's part of the company culture to give people time to think. They realize that to do their best work, they need time away from their screens. And so the three tenets, there's a few companies that I profile in the book, including Slack. There are three attributes of an indistractable workplace. Number one is that employees have psychological safety to talk about this problem, right? They can voice their concerns about this issue. That's number one. Number two, they have a forum to talk about these problems. At Slack, it's interesting. They actually have Slack channels where people can chime in. There is a channel called beef tweets, like things that you don't like about the company. You can voice these concerns. And get this, management will use emoji to signify that they're taking action or that they've seen those comments. They'll have an eye emoji or a check mark emoji if they've seen those comments. So upper management reads these gripes with the company. They don't always, take every piece of suggestion as an immediate action item. Sometimes they disagree, but employees feel heard. They feel seen. That's super important. And number three, and perhaps most importantly, is that an indistractable company has leadership that exemplifies what it means to be indistractable, because culture flows downhill. It's like water. Culture flows downhill. And so people look to their boss to see how distracted they are. Do they use their devices in the middle of meetings? Are they responding to emails and text messages? Are they sending text messages all day, all night? And they fall to the level of performance of their superiors, because that's what the boss expects. So the kind of indistractable workplace that gets the best out of people is the kind where management exemplifies what it means to be indistractable in the first place. It's amazing. If you go to Slack company headquarters, this shocked me. In the company canteen, you will see a big pink neon sign that reads, "Work hard and go home." Work hard and go home. It's the company. It's right there. You can't miss it.
Brilliant.
Because everybody in the company, from the CEO on down, believes that it's important to give people time to think, to do their best work. They have to do it without distraction, without interruption.
And how do they do that in a world of work from home?
Well, so the good thing is they can use their technology to solve the distraction caused by technology. So in the book, I teach you how to do what's called hack back the external triggers. That we know that if we allow these technologies to run amok, we know what they want, right? They want to hack our attention. That's how many of these companies make money, right? If we're talking about media companies, they're not there to inform us. They're there for us, whether it's the New York Times or CNN or any media company, they are there to hack your attention. They sell your eyeballs to advertisers. Certainly social media does this. We know that, but all form of media does this. And of course, we can be taken in by other forms of media, whether it's email or phone calls or text messages. So we have to hack back. And the way we hack back is to make sure we remove these external triggers that don't serve us. So for example, with group messaging, there's a few rules. For example, one of the quotes that I got researching the book was from Jason Fried, who actually runs a group chat app similar to Slack called Basecamp. And he said that group chat is like a hot tub. Okay. You don't sit in a hot tub all day. You go in the hot tub and you get out of the hot tub. If you sit in the hot tub, you get pruny and gross. And that's what happens to our focus when we sit in group chat all day. So don't make that mistake. Don't leave it open all day. Get in and get out at certain times of the day according to your schedule so that you can be productive as opposed to leaving it open. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more we can do as well.
Yeah, it's great to hear about then, especially what these tech companies that we assume are one way actually do in order to be the other way. But I wanted you to talk a little bit more also about one more example, which is the nurses in the high-risk jackets.
Sure. Yeah. So there's actually one industry that distraction is a matter of life and death, and that's in healthcare. That I was shocked to find that if you looked at the three leading causes of death in the United States of America before COVID, the three leading causes of death, number one was heart disease, number two was cancer, the third leading cause of death, if it were a disease, would have been prescription mistakes. Prescription mistakes. Doctors and nurses giving patients in hospitals the wrong medication or the wrong dosage of medication. And this is a 100% preventable human error. And so most hospitals say, well, what are you going to do? It happens, right? People make mistakes. So that's what we have insurance for. Until a group of nurses from UCSF decided to take on this challenge and said, no, this is unacceptable. We have to do something about this. People's lives are at stake. And what they discovered was that the reason that these healthcare practitioners were making mistakes and giving people the wrong medication was that they were distracted. They were being tapped on the shoulder by their colleagues. Every time, on average, they were dosing out medication, they were interrupted 10 times per shift. And every time they were interrupted, they were more likely to make mistakes. Now, the irony here, the reason I tell this story to people who are outside of the healthcare profession, is that the nurses didn't realize they were making the mistakes until it was too late. And so many of us, even if you're not in healthcare, we think we're doing a great job. Everything's good. I'm working at my best. But you don't realize how much better your performance could be if you would be indistractable. The good news is that this terrible problem, they found a solution to, that these nurses figured out a way to reduce prescription mistakes by 88%. 88% reduction in prescription mistakes. And the solution was not some multi-million-dollar program. It wasn't some fancy new technology. It was cheap plastic vests. These plastic vests that these nurses would wear that told their colleagues, it said on the vest, it was printed, "Drug round in progress, do not disturb." So giving this external cue, essentially interrupting the interruption from their colleagues, allowed them to work without distraction. Now, how do we apply this to our own life? Well, every copy of my book, Indistractable, comes with a screen sign, this piece of cardstock that's printed right in the book that you tear out, you fold it into thirds, and you put it on your computer monitor when you need to be indistractable. And I know you can't do this all day long, right? But some part of your day, you owe it to yourself to work without distraction. Now, what if you're working from home? Okay, what if your kids are a distraction? Well, there's a wonderful solution for that too. When my daughter was only 6 years old, my wife bought what we call in our household the concentration crown. It's this light up wreath that she puts on her head. I think it costs like $5 on Amazon, and you can't miss it. And we told our daughter when she was very young, we told her, look, when mommy's wearing the concentration crown, that means that she can't be interrupted and she will be with you within 30 minutes. Okay. Always, it'll be 30 minutes or less and she'll come back to you. And so it's amazing. It works like a charm because now what you've done is you've interrupted the interruption. It works really great with kids. It also works really great with spouses too. It's very effective.
Yeah, I think it's a great, the concentration crown, and giving people a space or a tool at work to say, I don't want to be distracted. I actually put things in my calendar and mark them as, focus time. So when somebody looks to, can I book him now? Can I not book him now? Okay, this is actually focus time when work is intending to be done.
Yeah.
I want to turn the whole thing on its head. Is distraction ever good? Because
No.
I think in certain cases, like
Nope.
innovation or
Nope.
no,
I'm going to
just in
interrupt
general,
you.
flat no.
Never good. Never good. Why? What's the definition of distraction? The definition of a distraction. So let's really go back to basics here. If you look at the source of the word distraction, what's the origin of the word? The origin of the word distraction comes from the Latin trahare, which means to pull. And you'll notice that distraction ends in 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N. That spells action. And the opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Traction and distraction. Traction, by definition, is any action, comes from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. It's any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that you do with intent. The opposite of traction is distraction, any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do. Okay, so distraction is never a good thing. Getting pulled away from something you plan to do with your time, with intent, with forethought, is never good. What is good, and I think it's what you're referring to, is not distraction, which is always bad. It's diversion. A diversion is a refocusing of attention, and that's great, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So if we're going to divert our attention into a great book, oh, wonderful. It can be a great time. A movie diverts us from reality so we can enjoy the story. It's great to divert your attention from one thing or another. Wonderful. But do it on your schedule. Don't do it when you have an internal trigger that pulls you away because, oh, this is hard. This is boring. I'm lonely. I'm stressed. I'm fearful. I'm uncertain. If you get pulled away because of an emotion, the internal trigger becomes your master rather than saying, hey, I'm going to plan time to divert my attention. So just as you said, a big part of the book, the second step of becoming indistractable is to make time for traction. So I don't really care what you do with your time. You want to read a book, you want to play a video game, you want to scroll social media, awesome, do it. but do it on your schedule. Put it on your calendar. Don't do it just because of a whim or because it's somebody else wants you to do it, like a tech company or your boss or your kids. Do it according to your value and your schedule.
Okay, one last comment, and then we're going to give the last question over to Marcus.
Sure.
I'm now in the distraction hole. I'm checking. I don't read Facebook. I'm checking Twitter. I'm reading news. I'm doing whatever I do, and I need something to interrupt me to realize that I'm in the distraction hole and to pull myself back out. What do you call that? Because I was saying, oh,
Yeah.
I can be distracted from being distracted, and in that case, it works. But there must be a better word for it.
So the reason that it took me 5 years to write Indistractable, one, I kept getting distracted until I figured out these techniques. And then once the hardest part was filtering it down what really matters. And it turns out there is no magic bullet. These stupid solutions, like grayscale your phone or, use Pomodoro. Like it's all great. Like, fine. Okay, fine. If it works for you, do it. It's not enough. You have to do these 4 strategies in concert. Okay, so here are the 4 strategies. Number 1, first and foremost, you have to master those internal triggers that we talked about earlier. You have to have arrows in your quiver ready that you can take out so that before you even start checking Twitter, you know what to do with that sensation that led you there in the first place. That's the most important first step. Second step, making time for traction. The days of having a calendar that's open, that has white space, are over. That's for children and retirees. If you want to do things in your day, you have to plan the time. Why? Because, first of all, if you don't plan your time, somebody's going to plan it for you. There's lots of vested interests out there that want your time and attention. And 2, you have no right to call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. If you have white space in your day, what exactly did you get distracted from? You didn't plan anything. So you can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. And I mean planning out every minute of your day. And you say, oh, that's so rigid. Why would I need spontaneity? Hey, you can plan spontaneity too, right? Like you can plan creative thinking time. That's great. You can plan diversions of attention. Wonderful. But put it on your calendar. The third step is hacking back the external trigger. So this is where we talk about the pings, the dings, the rings, anything in our outside environment that can lead us towards distraction, including our kids. Email. Oh my God. Meetings. How many stupid meetings are a distraction? I tell you systematically how to go through all of those external triggers. And then the fourth step is to prevent distraction with pacts. Pacts are when we make what's called a pre-commitment to make sure that we don't go off track. It's the last line of defense. And so when you use these 4 tactics in concert, that's how you become indistractable. So that you have a fail-safe. For example, one of the techniques that you use as the 4th strategy, you said, hey, I'm on Twitter. How do I stop? Well, part of the things that we can do is we actually can use technology to help us stop getting distracted by technology. So a tool that I use all the time is a site, an app called Self-Control that blocks out distracting sites that I'm likely to go to in a lapse of judgment so that I can't get to them during certain hours of the day. Right? Free technology, anybody can use it. And so that if I see, oh, you know what? I said from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I was going to do my focused work time. Oh, I can't get to Twitter in the first place when the clock strikes that time, or if I'm on it, it'll stop working. And so that's how we can use many of these techniques. But the important part isn't the specific tactics, right? That's cheap. The important part is the strategy. Tactics are what you do. Strategies are why you do it. So it's most important to remember those 4 big strategies. That's what's going to help you become indistractable.
Wonderful. And as usual, we have more questions than time. So here comes the last one.
Sure.
I wanted to go back a little bit to our kids, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And you say somewhere like less schooling means more focus. So education is, a lot of people talk about, is sort of broken. And Einstein has a quote on, you're very open, free, and whatever until you get put into the schooling system. I'm paraphrasing here. Tell us a little bit more about that, about less schooling and being focused.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily advocating for less schooling. I was citing a study of children who had less schooling, Guatemalan children. They did a study in Guatemala of children who had more schooling and less schooling. And what they found was that the children who had less schooling did, in fact, have more executive control. They had more. They were able to focus better than the kids who were in school. And so this was kind of a mystery, because we think, oh, the reason we want to send kids to school is so that they'll, learn how to be productive adults and learn how to sit still. And if they don't sit still, we diagnose them with ADHD and we give them medication so that they're under control. And it turns out that we're doing them a huge disservice. That I believe that that the institutions, especially at a very young age, as kids get older, things start to change. They have that function, but it turns out that when we tell people what to do, when we regulate someone's behavior and we tell them where to go based on bells and schedules, and it's not self-imposed, that's the big difference. When it's self-imposed, it's a big, big difference. When you make your own schedule, you have agency. You're doing it for yourself. But when someone else tells you where to go, what to think, what to eat, how to dress, who to be friends with, there's only two places you can do that to people, and that's school and prison. And so it's no surprise that two things happen. One, kids rebel, right? Just like people in prison, when we're told what to do all day, we don't like it, we rebel, and they don't learn to self-regulate. So it turns out that the children in this Guatemala study who didn't have formal schooling learned to regulate their time and attention because they were forced to. It wasn't imposed upon them, right? They didn't have the bell that told them where to go. They had to regulate themselves. And so they flexed that muscle. They learned how to have self-efficacy and self-agency because of the absence of someone constantly telling them what to do.
Wow. So a lot to learn maybe for organizations as well, where people tell each other way too much and about what to do in micromanaging. I'm sure there's some parallels there just as well. Nir, thank you so much for all these insights. It was a really great chat, and thank you for your time and being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.